Tackle Junkies, what's going on, fellas? Really appreciate you guys clicking on the video. Today we're going to talk about backing your reels and how that can save you money, which line you should use for backing, and how to figure out how much backing to put on your reels. Hope you guys enjoy the video. First up, what is backing? I do have a few videos that I've done in the past on this subject. I'll link those down below. Feel free to check those out. But guys, backing it's pretty much filler. And the best way to explain this, let's see here. This reel right here will hold 130 yards of 12-pound test. Some other reels will hold more, some will hold less. I think this is pretty average. Normally you see 12-pound for 120 yards. Like I said, this one here is 130 yards. Okay. I can't cast that far. I'm sure you guys can't either, okay? So there is no reason, we're going to call this like your good main line. There's no reason to put 130 yards of your good main line, your expensive line, on the reel. You know, typically I use anywhere from like, I'm going to say 60 to 75 yards is kind of what I like on my reels majority of the time for my good main line. Below that is backing. And the reason you have to back, let's just say you know you only want to put on 75 yards of your good line. Okay, if you have a bare spool, you tie it on, spool it up, well, that's not going to bring your spool, or your line, I should say, up where it needs to be. You know, you need to be close to the edge of the spool. Mine here are a little low. These reels are from last season still. I haven't stripped them off yet. But normally, like a 16th to an 1/8 is where I like that line from the edge of the spool. So if you only put 75 yards on there, the line's going to be way below that, and that's going to kill your casting distance. You need that line up close to the edge of the spool. Some guys are different. Some guys put it all the way to the edge. Again, I like just a little bit less. Helps out with overruns and backlashes and things like that. But like I said, that's pretty much what backing is. It's just filler. You know, like I have 1,000-yard spools here, guys, and I just feel that I have way less waste with a 1,000-yard spool, but it's definitely a much bigger investment in the beginning when you go to buy these spools. I mean, they're going to last me a while, but you're talking, you know, like the 15-pound here, 1,000-yard spools, that's like 140 bucks retail. If you buy a 200-yard spool, you're probably talking, I don't know, 20, 25 bucks, probably more than 25 range. So, you know, it's a lot cheaper to buy the filler spools versus the bulk spools. But again, the bulk spools will last longer, and you just have way less waste in them. Best to back any pound test that you put on. Like I said, a good example here, this reel, like I said, holds 130 yards, and that's usually, like I said, 12-pound. That's usually based on mono. So if you put on fluorocarbon, it's already going to hold more line than that because fluorocarbon usually has a smaller diameter. If you go smaller pound test, like 10-pound here, it probably would hold maybe 150 yards. So let's say you bought that 200-yard spool, and you got a bare spool, you tie it on, spool it up. Well, if you put 150 yards on there, if that's what it holds, well, then your filler spool only has 50 yards on it left. So basically, you have a bunch of leader line because it's not enough to re-spool. So that's why backing will get you more out of your filler spools, whether it be the smaller ones or the bulk spools, and just put on what you need so you get more spools out of the spools that you're buying here. So, like I said, 10-pound, 200 yards, instead of putting on that 150 yards, only put on 100 yards, and you can actually get 2 spools versus, you know, just the one and having some leader line left. Or, you know, again, depending what you're going to do, and I'll talk about this more at the end of the video, if you only need maybe 60 or 70 yards, you might be able to spool 3 spools with a 200-yard spool versus, again, just the one and having some leader line. So it's all about putting on the right amount of backing. Now, the big debate is, for backing, do you use mono? Do you use braid? Now, I've been using mono for years. I've always used mono. Really no issues at all with it. It's cheap. Like this one here, Bass Pro Mono. This is 1,500 yards. It's like, I don't know, 12 bucks. You know, this will last me a couple years. So pretty good deal right here. And I use the 10-pound test. Now, the deal with Braid Backer, I seen Aaron Martins do a video on this, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Could have been longer. I'm not really sure. But anyways, I seen Aaron Martins do a video on using braid for a backer. And right off the bat, I'm thinking, you know, I spool up quite a few reels. Man, that's going to be expensive. So, you know, I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it just because I never had any issues with mono. But it seems like more and more guys are doing it, you know, and the reason behind it, obviously it lasts longer, it doesn't break down like mono. You can strip your main line off each year, leave the braid on there. It's going to last for years to come. It doesn't have any memory to it, so it'll still lay nice on the spool. When you re-spool, it's not jumping all around on you. Braid's just easier to work with, so I mean, that's one benefit to it. Another is they're saying that it's lighter, so you get a few more feet on the cast versus backing with mono. You know, braid is lighter, so that line that's under your good main line is lighter, so you do get a further cast of what they're saying. Now, we're not talking like 20, 30 yards. We're talking, I think, 10, 15, 20 feet, you know, maybe 30 feet at the most is what I've heard. I can't I can't prove that. I haven't done it yet, but this will be my first year that I'm going to try backing with braid, and I'll let you guys know if it really is worth it. To get back on the price, that's why I was against it in the beginning. And I seen a video, my buddy Hank, BASSGEEK, check him out, I'll link him down below. He was using a Mustad braid, I believe. It's just a cheaper braid, I believe you found at Walmart. And that's what it hit me there, that I never thought about using just some cheaper braid. You know, I always had in mind, you know, the good braid that I buy, the FX2 or the Cigar flipping braid, Bass Pro braid, you know, they're all expensive. So if I'm going to back 20 reels, man, that's going to be a lot of money. But I never thought about using cheaper braid like I did with cheaper mono. And I was looking online the other day, found, I think it's Piscafun braid. It's a weird number. I think it's like 547 yards. And if for like a 40-pound test, which is the same diameter as this 10-pound that I use, I believe it was like 25 bucks. So if I, on an average, use 50 yards to back my reels, I could get like 11 reels backed with that one spool. So if I buy 2 of them, I can back like 22 reels. That's about all I'm going to, I mean, I'll never spool up really 22 reels. Maybe, I don't know, 16, 18 is what I usually spool up. But that's more than enough line to spool up all my reels, and I can leave that braid on there for years to come and not have to keep backing them each year like I do with mono. Now, pound test is where I had an issue years ago, and a lot of you guys have given me crap for that video. It's called How to Balance Your Spool. Maybe balance is not the correct word. I don't know, a lot of you guys, I think you read into that video a little bit too much, but I was explaining, and I'll link this video down below as well. I was explaining in that video, I had a reel, it was one of my, I think it was my old gold Johnny Morris reels. Man, I love those reels. Those are good reels. Anyways, I had, then I had backed with, I think it was like 20-pound mono. And I used to fish a lot of heavier line, and I just realized that I never really needed that heavier line anymore. So they were just sitting around, you know, 15 pounds is about the heaviest I go now. So I had like 17, 20-pound mono sitting around. So I was like, you know what, let's get some use out of it. I'm going to use it for backer. So anyways, backed one of my reels with like 20-pound test. And I had tied my main line on, went fishing, and every cast, man, those spool bearings would just scream. You know, when you hear somebody make a cast and you hear that zing, that real loud zing, and I knew my reels never made that noise before. And I was like, what is this deal? You know, so took the reel apart, checked the reel all out. You know, I kept cleaning the spool bearings, re-oiling them. I even tried different oil. I mean, it was really annoying me. You guys know how I am with cleaning my reels. If you guys seen those videos, if not, I'll link those down below as well. I'm really picky with my equipment and how they work and perform. I want them to perform the best that they can. So hearing that noise really alarmed me, and like I wanted that fixed. So like I said, after not being able to fix it with cleaning the reel and cleaning the bearings and all that, I decided to take that line off. And I knew I had backer on there, so I pulled the line off nice and slow. And when I came to my backing knot, I marked it on the spool with a marker. Okay, and then when I got down to the backer knot, the arbor knot on my spool, I marked that one. And both knots ended up being on the same side of the spool. Okay, they were not across from each other. Both knots were on the same side. And in my mind, that kind of unbalanced the spool. You wouldn't think the weight of a knot would do that. But guys, I went ahead and re-spooled, made sure those knots were across from each other. I'm calling it, I balanced it, whatever you want to call it. But I made sure those knots were across from each other, spooled it up, same pound test, made a cast, noise was gone. So if you want to believe me or not, I think it makes a huge difference. Now that being said, guys, that's when I was using heavier pound test. Like I said, 20-pound line, and Bass Pro Mono has a pretty big diameter. That's what I was using at that time. So like I said, I feel that it unbalanced the spool, that heavier pound test. I went to 10-pound test. Okay, and the fact that I don't fish with heavy line anymore, like 15-pound test, is usually the heaviest that I fish with. Like I said, I kind of got away from 17 and 20 just for the cover that I fish around. I really don't need it. You know, if anything, I use 50-pound braid, which again is the same diameter usually as like 12-pound test. So that's really the heaviest of diameter line, or the heaviest line that I use is like 15 pound. So I'm always going 15 pound max to 10 pound mono. And I've noticed with that, no matter where the knots are, I don't have that bearing noise anymore. So the spool is no longer balanced, we'll call it, because I'm not taking the time to make sure the knots are across from each other. But the fact that I'm using smaller pound test line, I don't feel it affects the spool as much versus the bigger pound test. Take that with a grain of salt. You guys can say it's a bunch of BS or whatever, but I took the line off, I marked the knots, I seen it, I made the cast after I fixed it. It worked. So having too big of knots on one side of the spool definitely made a difference. So like I said, if you're going to use that bigger pound test line or the heavier pound test line, and you do have a lot of bearing noise, that could be the issue. If you don't like that issue, go to a smaller pound test backer. If not, like I said, just go ahead and make sure those knots are across from each other. All right, now, how do you know how much backer to put on? It's really hard, guys, when you have a bare spool, because we'll say, you know what, I probably even got one. Yeah, right here. This is a line spool. I mean, I've tried everything, guys, okay? And I know I overthink everything. I mean, a lot of you guys tell me that too. It's just the way I am. I can't help it. I apologize. But I like to do everything the best that I can do it. So anyways, here is a line counter. So I've even tried that route. But when there's no line on your spool, and you know, okay, I only want to put 75 yards on there, you have to figure out how much backing to put on. So the first reel is usually trial and error. So usually I'll put on, 30, 40, 50 yards of mono. I'll go ahead and use a line counter. And once that's on there, I'll go ahead and tie it to my main line, spool it up, and go from there. Again, you can use the line counter to see how much you're putting on. If your spool's too low, you know you need more backer next time you do it. The line's already on there. You don't want to take it off. You can, like I've gone to a field before, stretch my line out, the length of the field, that way it wouldn't ball up and get a knot on me, and add more backer. You can go that route as well. That way for next time. But another thing you can do, if you already have the line on your reel, I haven't even stripped none of my reels from last season yet. What you can do is take your line, obviously on your reel, put it on your rod, go out, and you can put a heavy lure on, make the cast as long as you can, furthest cast you can make. And then you can pull out another, 5 or 10 yards, and what's left can be the backer, okay? You can do that. And here's a little trick, guys. Once you do this once, you no longer have to think or count yards or use this or whatever, use a line counter. It's all about the amount that's left. Okay, so what's the easiest way to do it? So you make that cast. I'm trying to think of the easiest way to tell you guys this. If you make the cast, let's say from where the line is left on your reel to the top of the spool is a 1/4 inch. Okay, then you know the amount of line, of good line, that you need on your reel is a 1/4 inch. Anything below that is backer, okay? 75 yards or so is kind of what I like to use for my main line. I feel, an average cast for me is anywhere from 35 to 40 yards. If I put 75 yards on there, that's more than enough for me to bomb a cast out. Plenty of line to retie if I have some abrasion on my line to cut it off. I feel 75 yards is more than enough. If that gets low, then I just go down to my backer knot, cut it off there, and re-spool. Instead of putting on too much line, then I'm just wasting line. I rather put on just as much as I need, not over-spool it, not overfill it with good line, just what I need. And I feel 75 yards for me gets it done. So if you're, like right now, it's pouring down rain right now. I can't go outside and make a cast for you guys to show you that. But what I've done is, if you guys can see this tape line right here, this is 3 foot. Okay, 3 feet is 1 yard. Okay, so from the edge of the spool here to here is 3 feet. So if you're in your house or something like that and you already have a line on your reel, you can go ahead and pull this off. Let's say you want to put on 75 yards. You would have to pull this off. This is 1, 2. Okay, you'd have to do that 75 times. Okay, then you would know, okay, that's 75 yards. So the distance that's left from the top of the spool is what your 75 yards represents. Let me go ahead and pull some line off here just to give you guys a better idea of what I'm talking about. I got a line stripper there, but the batteries are dead, of course. So we're just going to strip some line off here. Give me a minute here. This is old mono from last season anyway, so It's got to come off. So we're just going to go ahead and pretend that I've been measuring here, and I did, 75 times. So I pulled off 75 yards, okay? Get a little more off so these blocks will work on there. Because it sounds like it's going to be a hassle. But like I said, once you figure it out one time, there's no more counting turns to figure out how much line is coming on the spool. There's no more making a cast and all that, trying to figure it out. Once you spool your reels up each season, all you need is a gauge block. So this should be enough right here to be able to show you guys. So we're going to pretend that I just went and pulled off 75 yards. So I know I like 75 main yards on there. I just pulled it off. So what's left on here? You guys can see that? What's left on the spool is my backer. Now the distance from the line to the edge of the spool, okay, that's my 75 yards. Okay, that's what that is. So that space represents the line you pulled off, obviously. So all you need to do is get some type of gauge. Okay, this one here is perfect. This is usually the one I use right here. Now, if I lay this on here, okay, this is my backer. If I lay this on here, you guys can see that. Okay, this is to the edge of the spool. This distance right here, whatever this is, let me get a tape measure here so you guys, if you want to use the same, if you have a similar reel that holds the line, this right here is 3/16. Okay, so this 3/16 is normally what I use. Represents, so many yards of line, like 75 yards of line is usually what I put on. So that's all you got to do. So imagine that this spool is empty. So it's wintertime, you're going to spool your reels up, you're getting ready to fish in a couple weeks or whatever the case is. Actually, I take that back. I don't recommend spooling your reels up that soon. I like to spool my reels up like when I know I'm going, just because I don't want the memory sitting on there. If you do spool up early, make sure you guys use line conditioner. But whenever it is you're going to spool up, let's say your spool is empty, you tied your backer to your spool, you're starting to spool it up. All you have to do is, as you're spooling your backer, you keep laying this on that line, okay? Once this is even with the spool, you have enough backer on there. That makes sense to you guys? I hope it does. Let me know in the comments if I'm confusing you. That way there's no more, like I said, there's no more counting yards using line counters. It's every single reel. You tie on your backer, you start spooling it up, you check it. All right, I know that's what I went with this one. Next reel, tie your backer to your reel and start spooling it up. Again, you're not counting yards, nothing like that. Lay it on there. All right, it's even. I know I got enough backer on there. And you just do this, like this one here would represent, let's say, 15-pound test. Okay, now, let's say I'm going to go heavier. Okay, heavier pound test. Since this one here, we're just saying represents 15-pound test. Okay, I want a bigger gauge block for heavier line just because the diameter is bigger. So if I'm going to put 20-pound on here, and I want the same amount, the same, let's say 75 yards, then I'm going to want a bigger block because the diameter is bigger. So you'll see here, if I lay this on here, it's actually above the spool, so I need less backer. If I'm going to use 10-pound test, then I go with a smaller gauge block, because again, the pound test, or the diameter of 10-pound, is smaller than 15. So if I lay this one on here, you'll see that the gauge block is about 1/8 inch from the top of the spool. That means I would need more backer to accommodate, the lighter pound test. So guys, hopefully that did not confuse you. Like I said, if the spool's bare, you just start tying your backing on there, and you just pick your gauge block for whatever pound test it is that you want to use. And normally this one right here, just 3/16, is normally what I use for 12 and 15-pound tests. This right here gives me more than enough line to fish with for whatever. Like I said, I believe it's about 75 yards or so. But like I said, tie your backer on, check it, and you're good to go. You can cut a piece of cardboard. You can even use a tape measure if you want to, and just measure. Okay, I know that, I pulled off 75 yards. There's 5/16 left on my spool. I know 5/16 is 75 yards. So you just keep putting on your backing. Once you're at 5/16 from the line to the edge of the spool, you're ready to go with your main line. That's 75 yards. Again, I'm saying 75 yards. That's what I use. If you want 100 yards on there, again, you just keep pulling line off until you pull off 100 yards, whatever is left. Okay, the distance from the line to the edge of the spool, that distance represents 100 yards. So like I said, it's whatever the distance is. You're no longer counting yards. You're just counting or measuring the distance, and that distance represents the yardage. Like I said, 75 yards of this pound test or whatever. Again, that's for you to figure out however much line you want to put on. For me personally, for 10, 12, 15 pound test, I like 75 yards. When I, it's very rare that I put on a 20 pound test or a 17 pound test to flip with. But when I do, I usually only put on like 30 or 40 yards because I know that's all I'm going to do with that line. I don't make bomb casts, throwing a football jig with that heavy line or anything like that. I only use that 17 or 20 pound test when I use it. Again, very rarely. I only use that line just to pitch and flip with, so I don't need much on. So if I buy, and that's what I did back when I bought the Tatsu. I mean, a 200-yard spool of Tatsu was like, I don't know, 40, 50 bucks, something like that. But I actually spooled up 5 reels with that 200-yard spool because I only used 40 yards per spool, and the rest was backer. So hopefully, guys, that makes sense to you. Again, it can really save you money using backing. And again, these gauge blocks, hope I didn't confuse you guys, but these gauge blocks make it super, super easy once you figure out how much line you want to use. The distance, again, you're not going to keep track of yards anymore. All you're going to keep track is the distance from the line to the top of the spool, and that's what your main line represents. So hopefully you made it all the way through. If you did make it all the way through to right now, I really appreciate that, guys. Leave me a comment, thumbs up. Really appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. Thanks for watching, guys. We will talk to you soon.